grant writing skills series. I am Jesse Singleton, I'm the Assistant Director for Student Support with the Graduate School. I have Elizabeth, our GA, assisting us here today, helping out in both here in person and our staff in the virtual space. And so for my people who are joining us online, thank you for being here. She'll be my digital assistant. If you got questions, if you need me to slow down on something, pop a message in the chat, and Elizabeth will make sure that I hear about it. And we make sure that we're including you in the session here today. And so thank you for being here. And for our folks on in person, also interrupt me if you need something or can, we're going through. I like to be a relatively informal presenter, and that if I'm not covering something well, you want me to spend more time on it, or you have a question, feel free to ask me, right? I'd rather do this in the moment. We'll have some time at the end for question and answer, but if you're like, can you explain that more, or go into more detail, or what do you mean by that? Tell me, both in person and online. If we have any issues with sound quality or things like that for our folks joining us virtually, let us know that too. I'll make sure I work on that, make sure everything is going well, and we should have a good session. I do want to start off our session though today by making it work, but doing a quick thank you to Jen Green, who is the Director of the Office of Student Fellowships and Awards on our campus. Jen was kind enough last spring to help us develop, and was actually the first presenter for these sessions, and helped us with developing the content and the structure, and I appreciate her assistance with that. Jen works now here at UTEP, works predominantly with undergrads, although there are two major opportunities where she will assist you as graduate students. It is NSF applications and Fulbright applications, right? Fulbright is a study abroad program, looking for graduate students. She'll help with that, but I'm actually mostly focused on graduate or on undergrads. Prior to coming to UTEP, she worked at Stony Brook, and her focus was postdocs and grads. So, wealth of information and resource behind that. And she was kind enough to let us pull some of those materials here for this series, right? So thank you, Jen. I'm back here about Rachel Marcus talking about her office. She's amazing. We developed this program because we recognize that the process of finding funding and then writing well about the funding source and securing funding is a difficult one. And we wanted to do what we could to support graduate students on that path and provide resources for that. And so we're hopeful that this will help you be successful in those initiatives and those endeavors. And we wanted to create kind of a structured, scaffolded plan for that versus a one-off. And so there are 3 sessions that we will do for this that I think will help you along the process. The overall goal that we have for these sessions is we want to give you a basic just understanding of how to seek funding and write successful grant proposals for really any discipline, right? I'm not focusing on the sciences, I'm not focusing on the humanities, I'm not focusing on the social sciences. And so we're talking about this from a very generalized perspective, right? Now that is good and also has a limitation there, right? In order to provide a more generalized one, I can't always get into the minutiae of your specific programs or your future professions and the norms there. Nor can I truly be an expert at all, right? We have over 75 master's programs, 25 doctoral programs, and the funding for that and the grant processes are going to be very specific. And it's really not possible, unfortunately, for me to be an expert at all of that. But I can give you a good general foundation and then encourage you to seek out more guidance on the norms of your profession from your faculty, from fellow peers, from your professional organizations. That doesn't mean I can cover everybody. We are also looking to give information for folks regardless of citizenship status. And we recognize that's also a challenge because a lot of the funding that seems to be readily available is for U.S. citizens. And we know that's a hard challenge for our international students. We do talk a bit about how we can navigate that. I want to support you on that, but we know that's a harder road to walk. These sessions are designed to give it information to everyone, not just certain demographics. And we want it to be something that is for nearly any opportunity and is an early intervention into your funding seeking. And I'll explain why here in a little bit. Sounds good? Today is the first session. Today is about how you actually find the thing you're going to apply for, right? The first steps, and then we'll get into other sessions later. So we have our next session on October 16th in this room or online, same time. And that is going to be over writing your research proposal. So today, my hope is I'm going to help you navigate the funding landscape and find the few opportunities you want to start creating applications for, right? Give you those tools so that you can come back in approximately a month with some things ready to go that you want to apply for, and then you can start crafting your research proposal. after that, we have a mini writing retreat. The idea is it's a week after, is that I help you find the funding, potentially, or give you the tools to find the funding. And then you go out, you find it, you come and you learn about how to write your research proposal. And then a week later, you come back with a draft. And you come here and you spend 2 hours working on that. In this space where we have writing coaches right outside the wall, right? If you have questions, right? So we're building that in. And then about a month after that, on November 13th, we have the third and final workshop of this semester. And that is the crafting a personal statement workshop, which is usually another major component. Another major component of grant writing. And then another mini retreat right after that, right? And so everything is designed to build on the next and to give you space to practice that. Sound good? So that's what we're looking to do. All good over there? Okay. So that's our overall plan that we have. We have about 90 minutes for our session today. I will tell you that there's not 90 minutes of instruction, right? We have less instruction. At the end of this session, what I want to be able to do is take questions from the virtual space and the in-person space, but I also want to dig into the tools that we use to actually search out and find funding. And I want to put that into practice for folks in the room and see if we can find some things for you to apply for, right? So demo that. So we'll start with home there again, specifically working on that. It's good. Let's do a quick check of the chat. Everything is good. All right, so the first thing you need to know, though, when you're thinking about seeking funding is that planning is everything, right? Planning far in advance. Oftentimes, I'll have students come in and talk to me and ask me about funding. They're looking for funding for the next semester, or they need funding for their tuition support that active semester, and they say, what can I apply for, right? And the challenge is at that point, I can definitely talk to you about where we can locate sources of external funding, but it's not going to come for quite a while. And so we need to get in the habit of starting to plan about a year in advance when you think about your funding searches. So the first thing is reorienting our thinking when we think about external funding and what is the time frame, right? A lot of the heavy hitter external applications you apply for, your NSFs, your National Institute of Health, other major organizations, large funding opportunities, you're operating on about a year time frame, right? Now that's about 6 to 9 months of time writing your application, and the rest of the time waiting to find out if you've been funded. And so you have to plan about a year in advance. Some smaller applications, right? Some smaller scholarships, $1,000 here, $2,000 there, are not on that same time frame. They may be sooner than that, but you have to approach things and think of things from about a year time frame. It's important to think about also about what phase you're in and what funding you're applying for, right? So if you're not yet at the phase where you need to fund your research, but you know in the next year you will be, now's the time to start thinking about your funding research. If you're not at the dissertation phase yet, but you know you will be in a year, that's the time to start thinking about dissertation awards, right? You don't start applying for dissertation award as you are writing your dissertation, because you've already lost. And so the idea is that we want you to think about this about a year in advance, as opposed to when you immediately need it. So it's working so that I can have students come talk to me. They're like, I've got an overdue balance right now, and I need help with funding my tuition. Can you help me find a scholarship I can apply for? I will do my best, but the reality is that scholarship is probably not going to come to you in time to impact the balance this semester, right? So let's think about next spring and then the fall after. How you're planning that experience, right? So first thing is reorienting our thoughts about planning for the future, long term, right? That's the first hurdle. Now, there are a couple different funding paths. I've already thrown these around a little bit. So there's a couple. Today we're going to focus on what's called external fellowships. That's where we're mostly at. Right? I'll talk to you about what other funding types there are, but mostly we're talking about and thinking about our external fellowships. Those are things that UTEP is not giving you, right? That is the NSF, right? That is National Institute of Health. That is professional organization. That is a major funder or donor that is providing funding to you, right? That is like the Ford fellowships, although I believe the Ford fellowships have transition and all and they're available, right? Those major ones. Those are external funders. They're nationally or internationally competitive awards. We talk mostly about fellowships. When you think about grants, grants are typically more to fund your research or to fund a laboratory, right? Sometimes you can use those words interchangeably, but more often than not, when you talk about a grant, it's research focused and it's funding a lab or major research project, things like that. Fellowship is really more about funding you and your experience. Right? It can be connected to your research, but it's funding you, right? Kind of more similar to like a scholarship. You also have what are called internal awards. Those are things that your department issues to you, UTEP issues to you, or UT system issues to you, right? Those can be merit-based, those can be based off an application, those can be based off of status, but they're internal. Internal awards tend to happen faster, but there are more limited opportunities, right? Within the graduate school, we have two that you can apply for that are standing opportunities that we offer. There's the Dodson Research Grant that opened on Monday, right? Yeah, Monday. That officially opened, the application's up for 30 days. That's $30,000 to fund your research specifically in an application process. And then we have our travel grant that opens on October 1st. That is $850 to fund specifically travel associated with professional development, right? Those are internal awards that you can apply for here with UTEP. They are competitive awards. I can tell you the travel grant doesn't have a ton of money associated with it, so I can't give everybody the $850, and it is a pretty competitive award. I've got a good amount of money typically for the Dodson every year, and I can award funding from that, and it's a good award to have. Both of them are also really good places to practice your fellowship and your grant writing skills so you can be more successful with the external facing things. So I encourage folks to apply for them. So you get that experience and that feedback. But those are what are called internal, right? Part of the Dodson Research Grant is that we require that you provide some external funding through your process, right? That you apply for something because we want you to continue to seek funding. So you have to tell us if you apply for the Dodson grant, you're also planning on applying for what else that's external, right? And a lot of times students will put on there, my external funding is the Department of Chemistry Scholarship. That is not external funding. That is internal funding, right? So it's important for us to understand the difference there. Most of what we're doing today and talking about is really about external funding. We're going to show you how to seek out funding. Is external funding, those are the ones that are harder to find. Okay? All right. And as we go through, you'll see this in the different databases we use and how we search for it. The opportunities you pursue and when, they are specific to your career stage and where you're at in your studies, right? As I mentioned, there's going to be some stuff that's very early in. There are some pre-doc or pre-graduate studies awards that you can potentially apply for, although we're already now in this room, so if you would have already passed that milestone, but there are things you can apply for entering into graduate school. There are dissertation awards, there are research awards, there are postdoc fellowships that you can apply for as you're getting towards this end of your career. A recent graduate student who just finished their doctoral degree in spring with us was very effective at writing Dodson research grants and travel grants, got in practice with us, did 3-minute thesis and the grad expo and things like that with us to polish their skills, did get a $330,000 fellowship as a postdoc. And I'm not taking credit for that. He was a great writer, but he definitely had an opportunity to practice those skills to process as we do, and taking advantage of it, right? So those things that can be available to you if you get good at this. Questions about the funding terms? Yes.
How do we get access to the UT system? How you talk about the UT system?
UT system, yeah. So if you're getting something from UT system, it's not typically, again, they're not typically things you're applying for. It's something that you are identified for, right? There are some grants and some that they're almost like hybrid grants or fellowship things that will come in that we will notify you about, where we have one that is the, I can't remember the exact acronym, it's the OAS fellowship. It is only eligible to students who are from not the United States, but within South American countries that are attending here. It's very like specific criteria. And so for that, we basically pulled a list of graduate students who met all the criteria based on nationality. Because we get support, I think 35 fellows with that. And then we emailed everybody that was eligible and said, if you're interested, submit an application, right? And that's kind of a hybrid because we're getting the funding from an external source, but then we UT system related. Oftentimes, if it's UT system related, it's something that we become aware of, and then we notify all the eligible students and encourage them to apply, or you automatically receive that funding in some way.
Is it internal, not external?
Internal, because it is part of the UT system. You are part of the UT system. You are a UT system student, so it's considered internal funding, right? Same thing as like your program. It's a part of UTEP. That's all internal funding. Yeah. Good question.
I have a question.
Yes.
So it's about the internal awards. So
Yeah.
I had heard about this Dodson grant and I have divided maybe on a step. I think I can get clarified right now. So I heard it from my seniors and like one group of people say that again, it's only for those of us who complete the coursework and they are visitors. And the next group say that again, like it doesn't need to be like, you don't need to have completed the coursework, but if you are in some research project, you can apply for the Dodson.
That is correct. You do not have to be in dissertation phase to apply for the Dodson Research Grant. You have to be actively conducting your research in some way, and that's about it. Like there are other eligibility requirements and things like that, and we have a info session on the Dodson next week. If you're interested, I always strongly encourage folks to attend the Dodson info session because there are very specific eligibility requirements, ways that the proposal needs to be crafted. If you want to be successful, the data tells me folks that attend the info session are more likely to be successful. So, but check it out. You know, you don't have to be in the dissertation phase to apply.
Thank you.
Yeah.
In the chat.
Hmm?
It's a question in the chat.
Please, yes. What is it?
What are some examples of awards that will be automatically applied?
So awards that can be automatically applied. If you are a doctoral student serving in a RA or TA position in years 1 through 3 of your program, you receive doctoral tuition remission starting this year. Right? That is internal funding that is automatically applied. Right? So that's an example. We have other times where we receive a chunk of money from the university and the provost office to support degree completion over the summer, and so we were able to then just give tuition support to students who are actively taking summer classes who are working. That funding came to us as a way to push and to help ensure doctoral degree completion before the counting deadline for our R1 status, right? We need to graduate a certain number of folks within the counting period to maintain our R1 status. So when we get close to those counting periods, we'll have more initiatives focused on, hey, this person's really close. If we fund them in the summer class, can we guarantee they'll finish in spring, right? We want to make sure we can for those students. And so that is something that was internal funding was automatically applied. Identify the students, programs typically say, here's our people that we think would be good candidates for that funding. We vet them and then we send them the funding, hey, you've been awarded this funding. That example is things that are automatically applied.
The other question, I think you wanted to find out what question he asked about, but also specifically wanted the repetition of the question that he asked.
Sure. The question about Dodson was, do you have to be at the dissertation phase in order to apply? And the answer is no. You do not have to be at the dissertation phase. I will put a pin in the Dodson questions until near the end. We have a little more time just to make sure we can get through the material here. And because we have an info section about Dodson specifically, I'm happy to answer a few questions about it, but I want to try and save that either for the end, we have a little more time, or when we do that info section. All right. Next, kind of going through and giving you more examples of different funding types and where you may try to track these down. Again, you have your students who are in the early phases, the training and preparation. They're going through coursework, developing research proposals, working on their comps exams or their prelim exams. The type of things that you're going to be looking for in that phase is pre-dissertation or early career fellowships, right? Training grants or small grants. That's the type of stuff you'll be looking for. Those are the type of things you're looking for. So if that's you, that's where you're primarily looking at in your studies, right? If you are kind of in the middle, you're conducting your research, you may have finished your coursework, probably not. You're working at like data collection, maybe you're in the field of lab work, again, working on those comps with prelims. You're looking mostly at research grants at that point, right? The funding specifically about your data collection, or maybe you need to visit archives, how are you funding that? Folks that are in their late studies, they're in the analysis and writing phase. They're working on actively looking and working through their data through analysis. They're writing actively, they're getting ready for their defense. That is where you're looking at the dissertation writing fellowships, right? And a dissertation writing fellowship is one that pays you to focus on your writing so that you don't have to be employed or do something else, right? It's so that you can finish that dissertation, because where people often get stuck, right, and they get the ABD, all but dissertation tag, is because they've gone through all the coursework, everything else, and they reach that unstructured period of the dissertation, and we have lives that keep us from working actively on that writing project. It's easy to put off. And so the dissertation fellowship there gives folks the financial means to focus in on putting that writing, right? And if you need help with focusing on maintaining and getting a writing habit, on Friday, I talked about writing accountability. Come join us for that. And then the last one you have is the postdocs, right? These are folks who have finished their doctoral degree, they're in those first professional positions, they're doing research, they're publishing, they're working on career development. For that, you're looking at postdoc fellowships, early career faculty grants, or independent research scholar grants with fellowships. That's the type of funding you're looking for at that, right? And so there's funding at every phase of your careers, right? And this is heavily focused on our doctoral people, although they do translate also to our master's folks, just on a more abbreviated time frame, because you're only here for about 2 to 3 years, opposed to 4 to 5. Make sense? So there are a couple of tools that you can use, and we're going to go a little more extensively through Pivot here in a second. So I'm going to jump over that one and come back to it. But there are 2 that we have on our website on the external funding page. They are near the bottom. It's in the section called Publicly Available Databases. There's University of Illinois Fellowship Finder, and then there's UCLA GRAPES, Graduate or Postdoctoral Funding Database, right? Now you might be sitting here thinking, Jesse, why would you be telling me to use someone else's database as opposed to UTEP's database? The answer is that these are kind of what I describe as industry standard databases, right? These institutions are happy to have you use them, and they have really well crafted, well supported databases. Does anyone ever use the Purdue OWL for their writing? If you haven't, I highly recommend check out the Purdue OWL. That is the online writing lab. It is linked to by a lot of other institutions because it's the industry standard for support in online writing supports, right? There's a lot of work to support that. These are similar to that, right? I start with these because they are a good first step and a place to do a quick search. When we get into Pivot, Pivot is a much more elaborate and powerful database, but it requires more work and investment time. I encourage you to use all of them, not just one. And I've actually sat down with students and kind of mapped out, okay, let's do a quick search in Pivot. Now let's do a quick search similarly in Urbana-Champaign for University of Illinois. And then let's do one in GRAPES and see if we get some things that overlap and some new opportunities. We found that not every opportunity will fit in all databases, right? It's important to know how to use all of them. But with the 2 external ones, you don't have to create a profile. It allows you to select a couple of different things like demographic data, program of study, where you're at in your career, and it will filter out and it'll give you a short list, right? It's a great place to start. And it gets you thinking and moving through. And you'll find good opportunities there, right? But Pivot is where you'll go to develop a more robust plan, and we'll spend some more time. Another place you can do to help you find good things to apply for is look at the CVs of other researchers and scholars in your field, right? Not every fellowship or scholarship or grant that may be listed will still be available. I mentioned the Ford Fellowship. That fellowship has been sunset and no longer available. I used to be a major funder of folks, now it's not. So you got to be careful with that. You know, someone might have received something 20 years ago, it's not available now. But it's a great place to start to see, like in your area, in your field, fellow colleagues that you've worked with, your professors, what have they been funded at? It also helps you when you decide to apply for that funding opportunity. You have someone you know that has received it, and you can go and talk to them and get more information, right? So use those as good opportunities and good ways to explore what's out there. Because what will happen a lot of times is students will come in and they'll say, you know, I'm in biological sciences. Can you tell me what to apply for? My response is, I do not have a magical list of this is what you apply for, unfortunately, right? And this is particularly true for graduate students. At the undergrad level, we we can identify a short list of the major national awards, and we can push students towards those. We know there's more than that, but it's a little bit more big buckets, right? In graduate education, it becomes thousands of buckets and thousands of funding. And so when we ask for like, what's the magic list, you're limiting yourself, right? One of Jen's phrases that I really like is he says, you know, more is more, right? So you don't want to limit yourself and say, what are the things that I should apply for? And I give you 5 things. Those are the 5 things you look at. And none of the 5 things work out. You have no funding. But were those 5 things actually the ones that were most directly applicable to you in your research, in your career level, and you were most interested in? So by conducting researches in multiple areas, looking at CVs, things like that, we identify a multitude of opportunities, and then we just filter through and find out where we spend our time, right? So not advocating a shotgun approach of find 40 different things you can apply for and work on 40 applications, they're not realistic. But if you get a short list of 40 and you can narrow that down, much more successful than coming in and getting 5 from me and running with those. Sound good? So both of those external databases are linked on our external funding page. If you go to the graduate schools page and you click on funding and external funding, at the bottom you'll find both of those. Highly recommend using those. We're going to spend a bit more time on Pivot, and then we get to the end of the session. I'm actually going to log into Pivot, and I'm going to show you how to navigate it, and we'll do some searches in the room and see if we can find some stuff for you. We'll walk up here and go ahead and touch the smartboard and make sure it doesn't time out for me. Okay, that's good. Move on to the next slide. All right, so here is the login screen for Pivot. I got some screenshots here to help us navigate it a little bit, things other way, so that I can see everything that I need to. You can access Pivot in a couple different ways. If you just search for Pivot, you'll find it through UTEP's page. I've got Pivot linked on the external funding webpage. So if you click on it, you can find it there, or you can find it through the library. It's run through ProQuest. It is a subscription that the university pays for through the Office of Sponsored Research and Projects. And it is the same database that your faculty members would use to seek out funding and grants. It is not student focused. That means it's incredibly powerful. There's a lot in it, but it also means there's a lot that you have to get efficient at learning how to filter out and find. So this is where you log in. As you can see, you'll have an opportunity to create your own like funding lists, and I'll show you what that looks like. There's a spot for you to include and create a profile for yourself, which will help start suggesting funding for you. Another kind of things where you can track awards, things like that. But it's a great place to really solidify your search, right? But it does take a bit more training and a bit more experience and a bit more time to get familiar with versus, again, the external databases. You can do the external database search in like 10 minutes, right? You're gonna have to filter from there, but you can get a short list that you can start working through. In about 10 minutes of work, you can be like, you know what? I found 35 things. Now I gotta start looking through and finding what works, right? Pivot takes you a bit more time, but you get more granular results, a little bit more close results, and you can find things that are more related, right? When you log in and you create your profile, you're gonna see 2 buttons here. I know this is a little bit small for our folks in the room, but what I focus on here is that you're gonna see 2 options. There's use institutional login credentials or use email, create password. It's gonna be counterintuitive, but do not use your institutional login credentials, right? As I said, UTEP has a subscription, so you'd assume you'd use your login credentials. You won't find them there. And so you basically create your own login credentials, and it will move you to the single sign-on, so you can create it there. So you create an account here, you include your institutional email, your password, kind of create all that stuff there. That's what the form looks like. And that will give you access to the database, so you can start searching. And once you log in and you click on funding, you're gonna find this fun wheel here at the center, right? And I'll actually navigate this in real time and show you what this looks like. But this wheel here, what it allows you to do is you can, instead of searching by search terms or kind of typing things in and stuff like that, I really like to start here, this circle here at the center. Because when you use that, you can basically filter out by type and program, right? So each one of these wedges is like a major area, like this big one here may be social sciences, right? And then from there, you may go into a smaller subsection of social sciences and an even smaller subsection, right? But it also tells you currently in real time, when I took this screen cap, Pivot was tracking $135 billion in funding that is navigated through this database. It's a huge amount of funding, right? Not all of it will be applicable to you, obviously. But it gives you an idea of how powerful the database is. And a good, interesting way to start this is kind of go through and navigate that wheel, right? Get you thinking, get you moving around. What I do know is that not every field, not every specific program will be represented. A lot will, but not everything. I was meeting with a student about computational sciences, and computational sciences did not pop up directly. So we had to figure out, okay, so where else do we go with this? Once you kind of get familiar with Pivot, check out the wheel a little bit, you can move into the search and the advanced search, right? Search function is pretty straightforward. I'm going to talk through the advanced search and what this looks like. When you pop up the advanced search, there's going to be a top section where you can kind of use your Boolean operators and your search terms. You can start plugging things in. And this is going to sound counterintuitive, but you see that big section at the top with the big circle. I'm going to encourage you not to put anything in it at all. Right? Or if you do, very limited. The problem with this is that if you put a lot of information up there at the top, it will severely limit what you're looking for, right? So using an example, the student came in to talk to me about computational sciences. We put computational and sciences in there. We start searching, and he was getting very, very few results, right? We searched a couple of things that were specific to his research. We were getting no results. We stepped things back a little bit. It started searching more within the field and by area of study and by career type, career trajectory. We started finding a lot more things that should have popped up in the initial search, but didn't, right? And so the danger with Pivot, because it has this profile, it has these features, you can hyper-focus in on your topic and see what you get, but also remember to step way away and filter through. It is better to get 150 hits and filter through than to get 3, right? So I encourage you, and again, you can go through, you can be really specific, what's the thing that really seems to apply, but maybe make sure you step back, right? If you start to get right around 100, that's kind of the sweet spot that I feel like I've got enough, right? And from there, when you start reading, you'll start seeing things very quickly that yes, this, no, that, yes, this, no, that, by looking at the funding type, the name of the fellowship, the amount that's funded, all these different things, start highlighting out where you want to start moving things out. But once you're right around 100, you're in the sweet spot of where you can start filtering through. Does that make sense?
Ariana wants to ask if students lose their access if they graduate.
So yeah, that's a great question. As long as your UTEP account is active, you will have access to Pivot. And I believe if you go about 6 months after graduation, that your UTEP account is still active, and then it will go dormant and you will lose access to Pivot. That's where I do recommend that you get really good at navigating and familiar with the publicly available databases, because those will always be accessible to you for as long as Illinois and UCLA decide that they're accessible, right? And I don't foresee that changing. But that also means that if you know you're going to be graduating, right, working through Pivot and stating information outside of Pivot will be important, so you don't lose access to your work. Also seeing that if you do get a job elsewhere, what they offer you as part of, what are they using for searching, right? So if you get a job working in a lab or another institution, they have a subscription-based service that you can use, and they even Pivot.
Matthew also says that I think he's trying to create an account with his own credentials, but it's still prompting him to seek to put in the affiliate institution.
Yeah, it will prompt you, but like if you try to click on the, and you can put in UTEP, if you try to click on like login with institutional credentials, it will take you to a list and we don't exist. So if you use the other one, it should give you the option to put in UTEP and create your credential. And if you have issues creating a credential, let me know and we can work on trying to figure that out. Other things I want to call your attention to, we'll spend a little bit more time as far as like filtering. If you see here, you have the citizenship section, right? That's an important one to look at and potentially use. as we know that there are, unfortunately, less opportunities available directly for folks who are non-citizens. And so if you're not a US citizen, it is good to filter that so you're not going through a lot of things you know you're not available to you. There are funding types, keywords, all these things can be used, but you're primarily going to spend your time on the applicant type and then in a brief keyword search, right? And so from there, you can type in where you're looking for the application type and then the career stage. Those will give you the best starting points and the best filters for what you're looking for on research. Make sense? Once you've found some things that you're interested in, you can save those and start tracking them. And again, I encourage you to do this as you create your profile, right? And as you create your profile, it'll help you kind of save some things, but it'll also start curating and sending you potential funding opportunities that will fit for you. So the things that I really like about Pivot is that as new funding comes online that have met your search criteria or your profiles, if you have it set up correctly, Pivot will email you and say, here's your funding list, right? And it's not like it does it every 2 weeks. It is as things become available. This is my profile in Pivot. I'll be honest, I'm not a researcher. And I created this mostly to kind of navigate a little bit. And then I did some work looking at nonprofit funding to kind of get a sense of that. And I set mine up to give me nonprofit funding opportunities. And then I can then share that. You can see when I took this screen cap, I had about 30 curated funding opportunities that were popping up, right? And so Pivot will occasionally just send me an email and say, hey, these things are available, check them out, right? And so also the nice thing about Pivot is it will create these custom alerts based on how you set up your profile and your interests. So you can find again, oh, I didn't know about this one, now I can add it into my funding. You can't rely on that as your only way to find out about the funding, but it is a very nice feature that will tell you about it. Again, you can also track them, so if you know something has come up, let's say you find something and the application is due in a month, you know you're not going to meet that deadline, but you remember that exists so that you can apply it the next time it's available. You can put it there in your tracked area and keep track of it so you don't lose it, right? Again, we know we're busy. We know it's easy to forget things, right? We'll often think in the moment, I won't forget that that funding opportunity is available in March. And then a whole year goes by and it pops up and you realize, I definitely forgot about that, right? And so this gives you a place to store those things so you don't forget. So, and again, when I go here at the end, I'm going to pop into Pivot. I'm going to do some searches with you. We'll find some things that we can apply for. But that's the initial process of conducting your search, right? I want you to go into UCLA. I want you to go into Urbana-Champaign, Illinois, right? I want you to go into Pivot. And I want you to find these lists and create your own spreadsheets of what you're applying for, right? And start filtering and searching. But the tough part then, once you find the opportunity of this list of 100 is, how are you determining where you spend your time? Because you cannot submit 100 applications, right? And I said the timeline for submitting this is 6 to 9 months of work developing these applications. You cannot spend that much amount of time on 100 things. We need to distill that down to a few opportunities. And also, not one, not just one, right? Because the chances we're going to get the one we're applying for are not great. They're nationally competitive awards. Y'all are amazing, but you're competing with other amazing individuals, right? So our eggs don't all go in one basket. We select a couple of things that are applicable to us, we apply those. How do we figure out what that is though? So I have a checklist that we use to help you figure that out as you're going through. First, you think, does the funder support the work that you do, right? And not, do you hope or do you anticipate or do you wish they would support the funding that you do? Do they fund the work that you do specifically, right? I'm going to steal Jen's anecdote on this because it's a really good one. But she talks about a student that came in really excited about applying for a grant that was focused on Buddhist studies. And Jen's, well, you're not doing anything on Buddhist studies. Why would you apply for that grant? Well, there's like one section of one chapter where I mentioned Buddhist studies, so that works, right? No, it does not work. They're not funding the work that you do, right? That'll be a waste of your time. And you might be getting on the borderline unethical on applying for that if they're trying to fund a very specific type of work and you're not really doing that work, right? And so you need to first critically evaluate, is this funder supporting the work that I am doing? Right? Regardless of how tantalizing the opportunity might be. So if it does support the work that you do, you keep them on your list. Then you have to figure out, are you eligible? Right? And Pivot and Break and things like that will give you the eligibility criteria, but you can't rely on just what the website says. You need to go and look at the actual funder and do a close read of their eligibility and figure out, are you eligible in terms of citizenship, discipline, and career stage in other areas, right? You might find something that this sounds amazing, it fits my discipline, it fits my citizenship status. Oh, but it's not, it's for early career and I'm mid-career, right? Or it's for late career and I'm at the very start, so I need to put that on my track for later, right? So figure out where that fits. So first then to figure out if they fund what you do, then figure out, do I meet all the eligibility criteria? Looking in for those hidden ones that you might not know about. Then think about, can I complete the application requirements by the deadline, right? If you find an amazing opportunity and it's due in 30 days, can you meet that deadline, right? I would say, depending on the length of the scope of the application, 30 days is probably not enough time. Particularly if you're doing something like an NSF or an NIH or like a major government grant or like these major national awards, 30 days is not really enough time. Can you submit something in 30 days? Yes. Can you submit a competitive application in 30 days? Probably not. If it's due tomorrow, track it for later, right? So think about realistically knowing what I'm looking at in the application components. Can I get that done within that time frame? And again, 6 to 9 months. And then will the funding cover what I need when I need it, right? Again, thinking about what career stage you're in. If you're starting your search because you know you got dissertation coming in a year, that's when the target is, right? So that's when I'm going to need that dissertation funding. When I apply for dissertation funding when I'm in the dissertation stage, right? I'm a little late for that. Early on, right? I'm early career, I'm starting to look forward to mid-career, right? I'm looking forward to late career. So is it going to give me what I need when I need it? It doesn't do me any good to apply for research funding that's going to fund your research if by the time they get you the money in your account, you've already finished all of the research, right? You've already paid for it, it's all done, you can't use that grant in any way, doesn't help you. One of the major components of the Dodson Research Grant is you have to expend the funding within the fiscal year that we issue it to you. We don't have control over that in the graduate school. That is budget from the institution. That means when I give you the funding, by July of that year, you have to use it. Right? If you're applying for it and you're like, I'm going to use that, you know, the following May, no, you have to use it within the calendar year, right? And so will it meet your need in that moment, right? And apply the time that makes sense. So that's your quick search checklist, right? You go through, you find 100, you start narrowing it down, you find things you need to get a little deeper into, maybe you find about 10 that you really seem like they're good fits, and you're going through your checklist and finding out where you're going to spend your time. Once you find the opportunities that warrant a little bit more investigation, we're going to do our deep dive and really get into the minutiae of it, right? Go onto their website and look at their full eligibility criteria. There's going to be hidden clauses and things like that. Make sure you meet all of them. There's nothing worse than spending a whole chunk of your time, maybe months of your time, than getting to the phase where you're coming to talk to me or Jen about your funding opportunity and reviewing a draft. And we sit down with you and say, you can't apply for this. It's a lot of your time wasted. You don't want to waste. So make sure you know that in advance. Again, you just press how many times I talk to students that they've read something maybe in an email or an initial call or something, and they haven't done the deep dive and they haven't done the work to find out exactly what they need to do to apply or what the eligibility is. Do read the about section or the mission statement for the organization. This will really tangibly impact how you write the application, or is this the right opportunity for you? If you find someone that has a great source of funding, but you morally really disagree with their mission statement, it may not be best for you to apply for funding from that organization, right? Consider that. Look at the requested application materials and think about your feasibility of doing that. What all do you need? Some things will have really expansive lists, sometimes really short. And then look but don't stare and profiles of previous recipients, right? Think about and see who's been successful. They might have interviews with people or statements, things like that. We say look but don't stare. What will happen sometimes is if folks get a little bit too invested looking at who's won previously, they'll be like, I don't see myself represented there. I'm not going to apply. Right? Know that those profiles, they are very small data points. They don't represent everybody that's received it. And so you don't want that to be what you perceive as the only people who are going to win it. It's also good to talk to, if you can, faculty or colleagues who've either received the award or served on the panel. But again, remember, those are very small data points, right? Maybe you know a colleague that's a little advanced in your program that received this award in the past, they recommend it to you, and they're like, this is how I wrote my application and it was successful. You should do the same. Just because they were successful with that application doesn't mean that's the only way to do it or that you will, right? So take all those bits of information, look but don't stare, and use that to just get more knowledgeable about the opportunity, and then you craft your statements based on your experiences, right? You find things that are going to be best for you. Does that make sense? Again, a little bit small, but the specifics of the words aren't really important. Here's an example of then once you've got this list, how you organize yourself for your research. I encourage you to have an Excel spreadsheet tracking the things that you're looking at and applying for, and then marking off your progress. Again, if you're working through a couple different calls and they're really complex, it's easy to lose details or to mix and match them. And this is a great way to keep this nice and delineated, right? This is an example of someone's actual like spreadsheet for this, right? And they were applying for, unfortunately, this Mellon dissertation fellowship is no longer available. But it's a good example of someone being really detail oriented in what they needed. So they put first up the deadline and then a link to the award, right? So they can always go back and refer to it very quickly. The deadline was up front because what's the most pressing thing? When do you have to have it done by? Right? And if they have a time that it's done, if it's due on, the 26th of October at midnight, make sure you know what time zone in midnight it is due, and don't try to submit it at midnight, right? Because if it's due at midnight on Eastern time, what time is that for us? 10 o'clock, right? If you log in at 11 o'clock, you missed the deadline. Again, I use the Dotson for a lot of examples because I process and I'm the administrator for that, so I see these behaviors done by students. I will always have students that log in to submit the Dotson. It's due at 11:59 Mountain Time on a Friday night, right? I don't have it due over through the weekend, stuff like that. And I'll have students log in at 11:30 and start trying to process their application, right? And I can see when they tried to click submit was after midnight. Now they were in the application and it showed it's after the deadline. The system will put it as an incomplete application when it comes to me, right? Well, I started submitting at 11:30. Why did you wait till 11:30? Don't do that, right? But no, if you've got a time, make sure you put that there and make sure you figure out what time zone it is. And always cross-check, where that will be relative to your time. Taking into account also daylight savings time, right? Don't write it there and then 6 to 9 months down the line, assume that all of that is good. Triple check that stuff because those are the types of things that at the last minute can really trip you up. And you wouldn't expect all that work for an hour of time that you were a little off on, right? And it can happen. I just had 2 weeks ago, I had a meeting that was in Eastern time. When I put it on my calendar, I put it in Central. Right? I got the meeting invite, I knew it was in Eastern time, and I didn't cross-check it, and then I put it an hour earlier, which is Central time zone, and I missed an hour of the meeting. Happens to all of us, right? Don't let that happen to you. Put the criteria that you have for that, really helpful there to know exactly what you need, and then all of your required documents, and then mark them off as you get them, right? Do you need an online application, your dissertation proposal? This one wanted a 25-page excerpt from a long chapter, right? What all do you need in this document that you're going to be working on over the 6 to 9 months? And then note anything that may be optional. This one required a portfolio. Touch the smartboard, so it went forward. Let me go back. I don't think this thing is really touchy. Okay, sorry. Technology is a little touchy today. And then the follow-up pieces. This one, they're indicating when they would need to send out requests for letters of recommendation, and then when they're following up. And they were also to note that they received the award, right? And you see that the deadline for applying was October 2016, and they found out in mid-March 2017, right? It takes some time for people to get back to you on those. So account for that, right? And note, like, again, what your response is. If you receive a fellowship, if you don't receive a fellowship, right? And don't take it personally if you don't receive the fellowship, right? A lot of folks are applying. It doesn't reflect on you specifically. You don't know what was happening with the reviewer that day, in that moment, who you're competing against. And it's good to know not just the successes, but also where you spent your time, right? One of the things Dr. Dura, our former associate dean, would always talk about, that she puts on her CV, not just the awards and the fellowships and things that she's received, she puts everything she's applied for on her CV, right? It helps demonstrate that they're a very active seeker of funding in their profession, right? And so I encourage you to keep track of what you're applying for, right? You think about you're looking at your postdoc position or your first faculty positions, or maybe you're in a national laboratory, showing that, like, I can put in a lot of major funding applications. I've received these, but I'm very, very productive at seeking funding. I'm aggressive at that, right? That's an actual skill. So this will help you track that for the future in your CV. Also good to make sure that you are very organized for your letters of recommendation when you're putting together your application. A lot of them will require them. What I will tell you is, if someone tells you, if you ask for a letter of recommendation and they say, sure, write it and I'll sign it, please do not write it. And think about how you can have that conversation to encourage them to write the letter. You are getting in some very unusual ethical territory in that regard. What I always do anytime someone asks me for a letter of recommendation, I say, absolutely, if I'm willing to recommend them, tell me a little bit more about what you're applying for and what characteristics you want me to speak to, right? A lot of times I'm doing job recommendations, right? And so, like, I don't know what you're applying for, and what are they valuing, right? I'm not gonna make stuff up, but if this job really wants me to talk about your collaboration, I want to highlight what you did for us for collaboration. So when you think about putting these things together for your faculty and folks that can be your recommenders, think about, again, what they're going to need in order to be successful, right? Are you providing them with a copy of the call in a PDF? Good idea. A link to the funder so they can look into it. Letting them know how they're going to submit the information. Right? Are they going to get a link, or are they going to send a letter to you? Or are they going to send a letter email to somebody else? What does that look like? And then again, what do you want them to write towards? Right? Give them all that information so that they can be good recommendations for you versus a bland one, right? If you don't give them, they say, yep, they're great. They write to something that has nothing to do with what the funder is interested in. Between you and someone else, that letter may be the differentiating factor, right? So give them good tools to support you in that. Make sense? And I'd like to track this as well, so you know exactly what you're asking for and what you're following up with, and make sure it's meeting those needs. Okay, a lot of it is organization, right? As we mentioned, planning is everything, right? We're talking about that you need to plan effectively, right? And you got to go year in advance. All that stuff. Set the table for it. Make sense? All right. Any questions online?
No.
Okay. You stuck with me so far. We're getting towards the end of the conversation. The Jesse talked at you, and we're going to get to the more dialogue piece, I promise. All right. So I want to just take a really quick minute to talk about the grant writing skills series and what we're doing with that, let you know what's going on here. We actually we want to try to get as many students move through this, because we know this is beneficial in helping you write grants and hopefully be competitive with these grants. And so you have a little incentive if you go through the entire program. I encourage you to do that. You already attended the first workshop. If you attend all 3 of these workshops, and they do not have to be in the same semester, right? It can be fall, it can be next fall. I'll keep doing this, right? If you attend all 3, and you attend at least one of the mini retreats to get some feedback or work on your stuff, come talk to me about it for 15 minutes as you're getting ready to apply, and then let us know that you submitted your application. I will give you a bookstore gift card, right? which really isn't that much across the semester. If you're gonna be doing all this anyway, right, and getting good support, 3 workshops, a mini retreat, a conversation, and you deliver on that actual application, you go buy yourself a t-shirt, right? Bookstore gift card. Encourage you to do that. I'm gonna try and make sure I'm tracking all of these things as we're doing them. So you have attended this one, I'm gonna track your attendance, I'll note that down. I'll keep cross-checking this, right? The kind of final piece to let you know that you've done it is when you come talk to me and you show me your submission, right? Or you submit the form saying I've submitted that grant application, we'll get done with that, right? Yes.
Okay, so does it have to be like in chronological order? Because
No.
I'm submitting the NSF in October.
Okay.
So would that count as my application for funding? I mean, I will continue because I know it's highly competitive, so I will continue looking, but just so I can cross something off.
I'll count it.
Okay.
You gotta let me know you submitted the NSF, you gotta do the other things, but coming in, let me do that, yeah,
Yeah.
it works. And if you're doing the NSF, do also make sure you talk to Jen, because Jen is the support person for NSF, we collaborate with her on that. And she is much more knowledgeable about NSF. We try to do what we can to get as knowledgeable as her, but she's amazing. Any questions in the chat about this? I'll pop up. All good? All right. So that's what we're doing overall in the series.
Okay, there's one.
Yes.
Can I apply for multiple grants? What happens if I receive more than one?
Yeah, you can definitely apply for multiple grants. You should apply for multiple grants. If you receive more than one, there's no one answer for how this works. If they overlap and they provide the same type of funding, you basically have to pick one or the other, right? If they provide different types of funding or they allow basically they're paying you, you may receive just additional monies, right? It depends. There's no one type of grant, fellowship, or scholarship, right? Some will like it's paying your tuition, and then your tuition is already paid, so there's nothing for them to pay for, and so you decline it, right? Or you pick a different funder. Sometimes you have a grant that will fund your tuition, and then wraparound supports to help you be able to live and eat while you're doing your research, right? And you may get another one that funds your tuition, and they're still going to provide wraparound support to you. There's no one answer to that, but I will say I encourage you to apply for multiple grants. And if you win more than one, that is awesome. And keep up the good work. So this is the external funding page. I kind of referenced it. Actually should have updated my screen cap for this. I changed the buttons a little bit on there. But you see where I have this workshop archive right there. If you click on that, it'll take you to our workshops and events page. I record these sessions. I record all the sessions we do. And I post those up. And so in about a week after this session, I'll post this. I have last year's version up right now. I'll post with the new one. This log your NOI and report your award is now one button. It's the grant tracker. And so if you apply for things, I encourage you to submit the grant tracking form. It just lets us know you applied for something and you've received it. And it helps us celebrate you all, but also know where people are successful overall. The pivot database is right there. And so if you want to link to that, you can find that. And then if you just need assistance financially, there is the UTIP emergency aid button there that links to the Dean Students page for that. Bit different, but I put it in there because if you're here thinking about money and funding, they may pop in your head as useful, right? A lot of other information here about what we do related to external funding on that page. I encourage you to check that out, and it's also a way to link you and get all the information that we talked about today. And then you can find some specific information about the grant writing skills series. This is the outline of what we're doing right here, right? And you can see the workshops and mind tracker here. And then for our international students, I have a subsection of our website that is specific to helping you find grants, fellowships, scholarships, funding opportunities that are eligible for international students. So if you click on this Learn More button here, it will pop up a couple different specialized databases I encourage you to use, right? Not all of them will apply to every person. You have to find the ones that may apply for you. Like there's one there specifically for international female engineering students, right? And I'll go through some different databases, right? But I encourage you to check those out. That's a great place to help you find that search if you've been struggling to find funding as an international student. This can help give you those specialized databases and get you thinking about where you might find it. We also might find in there is some good search terms that you can plug into Pivot to help you find even more opportunities. If you have questions, if you're going through your funding search, you're not finding things in Pivot, you want to talk more and just do an one-on-one session, or maybe you're through the whole process, you want to schedule a little 15-minute conversation before submitting, email GradFund, and that will come to us at the graduate school, and myself or one of my staff members will definitely meet with you, we'll help you out, right? You got questions throughout the process, email GradFund. We're here to support you, right? That's our email we use specifically for that. If you are looking at NSF GRFP stuff or Fulbright, Jen's email is right there, JL Green. You can also go to the Office of Student Fellowships Awards or OSFA. You can find more information there on those. And again, if you're working on those applications, strongly encourage you to connect with her and with us on that so we can help support you on that, right? And so we're here to help you with that. Sound good? All right. So that is the talk at portion, right? We did pretty good. We still got about 30 minutes left, a little less, where I want to take questions and I also want to go through Pivot in real time. All right, there is Pivot. Y'all can see the, when I focus online, y'all can see the screen now, correct? Okay, great. Thank you, Daisy. All right, I had to switch because it wasn't liking the in-room computer, and now I'm looking at on my laptop here that we have on our screen there. So I'm logged into my funding profile. I'm gonna click on funding here. I'll walk you through what this looks like. So I'll start on the funding discovery one. Now it's at 109 billion. It's a little less than last time I looked at it. But as you can see, you kind of scroll around. It's an interactive wheel. It catches up. There we go. So there's 43 billion for social sciences, 61 for natural physical sciences, right? Law, agriculture, keep going around, education, engineering, med health, right? Let's look at natural and physical sciences, and we go deeper, atmospheric sciences, climate change, right? Or you can go really granular, here's biological sciences, biological instrumentation, microbiology, trans infection, bacteriology, right? Let's look at ecology. Let's just start there. So it's 693 million, right? That's a little wedge. So if I click on it, 180 awards pop up. Okay. Now you can get kind of an idea, is this award for me? By looking at the amount, where I usually like to start when I'm looking through. This one's in pounds, right? For the British Ecological Society, probably not for me, because I'm in the United States, right? So unless I'm going to be studying over there, probably not for me. You also find sometimes, see if I see any very, very large ones. 80,000, that's kind of big. 13 million euro. That's not for me, right? That's to run a lab, right? So I point that out, so when you go through that initial search, that just the funding wheel, it's got everything in it. And it's okay, it's really cool to see, there's a $13 million grant out there to run a lab, right? That's something aspirational. Good to know those things exist. Not really what we're looking for. So we start here usually to get us an idea, and I like to kind of gets us thinking a little bit, right? But more often what we'll be doing is going into the funding space. Then we'll go to our advanced search. And let's go ahead and do one. Who wants me to search for? Elizabeth wants me to search for. All right. So let's start with, let's look at citizenship first, yeah? So add that. Okay.
Oh, beautiful.
And let's go then career stage. Early career, okay. Let's go ahead and let's do mid as well. see what's available in the future. Activity location is going to always be the United States if you do this. And I wouldn't even bother if you can filter it, but just know that it will always be the United States. Even if you're planning on doing the Fulbright and studying abroad, the activity is still United States. Just so you know. Let's look at, let's do a keyword. Be a keyword.
Climate change.
Okay. And let's search see what we get. 98 results. That's actually right in our sweet spot, right? Now I wouldn't say like, okay, we're done. Like, right, we would do more searching and more refining, more keywords, right? But pretty quickly we got to our 100, right? So if we look through here, we might find something here's like a 20,000. Here's a 1,000, recognizing excellence in research and leadership in atmospheric climate sciences. Maybe that really seems good for us. We click on that, right? This is what we'll see when we look at that. So we have first a link to the funding page. The funder is listed here. So this is the American Geophysical Union. They are a professional society or association in the United States. They're giving $1,000 cash award and a ticket to the Atmospheric Sciences section dinner. Ooh. And they want you to come to their meeting and recognize you. All right. It's unrestricted on citizenship, activities in Louisiana. So unless you want to go to Louisiana. Then there's an abstract here where you can see what they're doing. And then here's your eligibility. Must be an active member of the organization affiliated with their subsection, scientist within 8 to 20 years, post-PhD or highest degree, not an HE fellow. So we start digging a little bit deeper, there's an active scientist for this, right? So it's not looking at our grad positions. That's okay. College repeated once a year and it opens in January. See all that information, right? So what I really like about Pivot is going to give you a lot of information. I'm going to back us up here and look at limited submissions. Anyone know what a limited submission is? No? That's okay. Limited submission means that your institution can only submit a limited number in an application cycle, right? So there are 2 limited submissions in this funding list. Let's click on and see what it gives us. So you've got AXA, postdoctoral fellowship. I guess that might be in Latin characters. What's the X? Alpha what? Alpha.
Latinx?
Huh?
Latinx?
Yeah, but the X in Latin. Chi? Thank you. So Alpha Chi Alpha postdoctoral Greek. And then yeah, Greek. Thank you. Then you have the strengthening health and disease modeling public health decision making in Africa, right? By the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. That one is $1 million, right? Limited submissions. Maybe only one eligible for your institution. If you do anything with limited submission, which more than likely as a grad you are not, right? But in the future, as a postdoc or as a faculty member, things like that, or working at a major laboratory, doing some limited submission, you basically have to communicate with your organization first and find out is anyone submitting it, and then get the approval from your organization, your institution, to submit that application. If you and someone else are working on it, they have to decide who they're going to basically put forward. Limited submissions, what that means. All right, let's go back. Let's start again. Go to advanced search. Let's start just a regular. Let's go in right from the regular finding search rather than go to advanced. Someone throw some keywords in. Genetics. 278 results. Okay. So from there, let's say I only want confirmed. I don't want anticipated. So I'm going to click on that. That means that If the call is confirmed, they have date. Anticipated means that they're likely to give it out, right? They haven't really put it out there yet. All right, so we got that. And then on the funding types, we're gonna look at scholarships, trainings, and bursaries. And then I wanna look at graduate, student, or pre-doc. 5, right? This has gotten us way down. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna take off the funding type and see what we get and help us up a little more. 16 results now from that, all right? Not bad, right? Here we have things like travel grants and poster prizes. We've got grants in herpetology, right? This is a relatively small one. 4-year PhD studentship in science, right? There's a postdoctoral fellowship for 33,000 or 30,000 pounds. So it's a good way for us to get an idea of what is out there and what's available. That was all just looking at genetics, right? And then filtering from there. But as you can see, by just filtering by genetics and then confirmed and by graduate, that's not a lot of filters to apply if you really think about it. And we're down to 16 results, right? And so I would say the thing that's probably limiting us is the search term genetics, right? And so if you were thinking about your search terms, how would you move genetics one level up in specificity? So it's 1 degree less specific. Think about that.
Cell biology.
See what we can do? Let's go back and we'll start again. So, I spelled my earlier right wrong. 152 results. Then let's go back and we'll do similar ones. We'll confirmed. And then we're gonna go to graduate student pre-doc. Gets us to 8. Not a whole difference, right? But see, there are some similarity and some difference in that list, right? So that's where you have to be persistent, right? We can't just search one thing, one search term, one area. It does take time, does take some effort on that. Sound good? All right, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna model this and I'm gonna take us to one of the external databases. I see I've got, I'm gonna look in the chat, see if we've got some comments here. So maybe some folks want to take a practice. Let me see the chat. A question here, do we create our account using login for my institution? No, you do not use login for institution, you use the other one, the create account feature. So I'm gonna stop share. And go to, actually, let me show this real quick. All right, so here's our external funding page. You can see if you go, there's a pivot, you know, how you get into that. If I go down here, recommended publicly accessible funding databases. That gives me the Urbana-Champaign, and it gives me the grapes. So let's look at Urbana-Champaign. Actually, you can still see it. Yep, they can see it. Okay. So here, let's say I'm going to look at social sciences for international students, and I want dissertation research. And I'm gonna look at early years of doctoral as well. I'm interested in, let's say, everything. And eligibility, everything. And I'm not gonna worry about limiting my results. And then genetics. Go back to that one, search term. Let's see what we get. 3, right? Leakey Foundation, National Milk Producer, and Royal Anthropological Institute. All three of those were not in our other database. Right? Now, I don't get through results. I did some other things here in filtering it, but again, a quick search. I got 3, right? If I go just to science, I get 107. Now from there, the 107, I've got more filtering to do, but at least I've got some work to do in figuring out not losing something that may be helpful to me, right? Right, here's one from the Chicago Field Museum for Dissertation Research Fellowship, 32,000, 1-year residential dissertation fellowship for a female student conducting research related to the Field Museum. Very specific. If you want to go to Chicago, the Field Museum is awesome. This could be the opportunity for you if you're in curatorial studies, right? But I want to show that and show like how quickly you can move through something like Illinois' database. I'll tell you, UCLA's database functionally works almost exactly the same, right? The interface is slightly different, but it's simple. It's check off your boxes and move through. Go ahead and get specific on a first search, but then from there, step it back. Because when you see like, I only got 3 things, you know you are missing something at that point. Step to the front here because Teams crashed and then relaunched. Alright. Okay. So it's about 2:23. You're rounding out the end of our time for our session. So I do want to kick it back to questions that you may have. And so let me stop the share here.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
So how often do you suggest we take a look at these databases? Like once a semester, like every week?
That's a great question. It depends a little bit on where you're at in your search and your career,
Okay,
right? But I would say it wouldn't be a bad idea to build in a little bit of time once a week and just kind of search a little bit. You'll, for a couple of reasons. One, you won't miss anything that pops up, hopefully, right? You'll also build up your knowledge and your ability to navigate these databases when you use them regularly, right? And you'll be a little more prepared for that. You may be in a stage where it's like, I don't necessarily need, funding on the weekly, but you build the habit of, I'm consistently kind of looking and seeing what's available. As you move into your future profession, developing that into a habit is going to be powerful, right? I'm always kind of looking, right? Make a habit of it, right? At the least, I would do it at least monthly. And if you do it monthly, a little bit more time, right? If you do it weekly, you can spend 15 minutes where you just know like, oh, I know that on Wednesdays, I've always got this like half an hour gap between one thing and another where I'm just kind of hanging out on campus. And that's when I just start doing a little bit of a search, right? And maybe I find a couple of things and I save a couple of things and I come back to it later, right? Let's squirrel away some time, or maybe it's something where it's like, you find yourself with 15 minutes, like, oh, I need to do that. You just kind of go in there and play around a little bit, treat it like a game, and try to find something. It's a good question. Other questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, so my research field is it's very niche.
Sure.
So most of the workshops I go for they're updated like 2017 and everything. So it's kind of a sticky situation. But something recently, there was a workshop that the website wasn't updated, but I was seeking an award, but fortunately I got funded by somebody, Touchwood. So yeah. So I was wondering if I could come to you guys and see if you can negotiate as UTIP, under the banner UTIP rather than me as a student negotiating. Do you think that will make a difference? And is that possible?
That's a good question. I can't guarantee it's possible. I think that you can always come talk to us and we can get into the situation even more and understand it a bit better. What may be more effective from there would be a PI.
Yeah.
Negotiating on your behalf and seeing what's available and what's possible. But we can help you on that path. and better understand it and how we can do that.
Yes.
You should always look at your institution, your PI, and the folks around you as your resource and your advocate though, right? You have to work on that to get them to be your advocate, but we should find some ways to do and support that.
Makes sense.
Helpful?
Yeah, thank you.
Other questions? Any online? Okay. All right. Thank you, Daisy. I appreciate you for letting me know. Well, I have appreciated you taking the time to meet with me today. I know 90 minutes on any session is stretching it, right? But I appreciate you taking the time that hopefully it was helpful, instructive for you all. Take the time after the session, log into Pivot, log into these databases, start searching, try to apply this now. Reach out to me for ways that I can help you navigate this. If you go through and you're like, it doesn't function the way Jesse said it would, come talk to me about it. We'll sit in my office, we'll figure it out. But be active in this, be persistent in this. If you applied for funding in the past and it hasn't worked out, don't let that get you down and stop applying for funding. That's the other piece that I hear from students is that I've applied for funding in the past and I didn't get it. So it doesn't mean you stop, right? I tried on a pair of shoes and they weren't comfortable, so I gave up on wearing shoes. Nope, you kept trying on shoes until you found the one that fit, right? Funding's the same way, you gotta keep after it. And depending on your career field, the likelihood, if you're in this room right now, the likelihood is this is part of your life moving forward. Whether you want to be a faculty member, you want to work in a research lab, right? You want to work in industry, the chances are seeking funding and writing applications, it's part of what you're going to be doing. So build it into a habit now, work with us on it. And don't be discouraged, because again, I promise you, you're going to apply for stuff that you're not going to get, right? No one's a unicorn that gets all the things, and that is okay. Not everyone's the best fit for everybody. Be willing to put yourself out there and seek the help, support, and do it, okay? Again, we have our next session on writing your research proposals coming up in October on the 16th. I'd love to see you back here for that. And we'll have things throughout the semester. Reach out to us with questions. Grab a cupcake. So I don't eat all of them. Please help me. I don't want to eat that much sugar. But I will go ahead and close it there for the day. Thank you for my online folks. We'll end the Zoom here in just a minute. If you have questions you want to ask in a more one-on-one setting, or you want to put it out there, send me an email at GradFund. I'll get back to you on that. Otherwise, have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thank you.